Welcome back everybody to another episode of our weekly Moto News Roundup, where this time round we'll look at some new middleweight KTMs out testing, MCN's best bikes of the year, Enfield put their latest new bike to the test, Stark are planning a road bike, CanAm are slashing their prices though, Honda are working on some weird new wheels, Powerdrift mock-up a tasty Thruxton, perhaps there's a solution to one of the biggest problems with Honda's new Retro, and we'll round off with looking at a trial for potentially some 90mph motorways. But we'll kick off with these spy shots that appear to show a pair of new KTMs out testing, and they could be an indication that they're about to reposition their small to mid capacity lineups. One is a fairly aggressive looking adventure bike with their new signature headlight, a tall stance, a big 21-inch spoked front wheel, and an upright riding position. Although, while it does have the look of one of their larger capacity adventure bikes, actually, when you look at the pictures closely, well, it appears to be a new engine that's fairly modest in size and has two exhaust headers sticking out the front. So could this be a twin-cylinder replacement for the 390 Adventure? Well, it certainly looks that way, and with more and more twins arriving on the mid-capacity market, stuff like the CF Moto 450 MT, BMW's upcoming F450 GS, Aprilia's expected Touareg 457, and Kawasaki's twin-powered KLE, which they've also teased, well, it'd be no big surprise if KTM were to follow suit and update their offering. The rest of the bike looks pretty much as you'd expect, with the suspension from their own brand WP, a single disc up front with a KTM branded 4-pot radial caliper, their signature TFT dash, so I assume the tech pack will be similar to the 390 as well, although it doesn't get their low-hanging fuel tank design, which is another clue that this bike sits below the 790s and 890s. Now, on top of these adventure bike shots, there's also a naked version Spied. It was only one picture of this one though, and it does look very crude, especially that subframe, but I think it's fair to assume that this one could be a 490 Duke. So what do you think? Is it the right move to go for a twin, or is the single 390 too good to drop? Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, over at MCN, they've just published the results of their annual awards, and Honda's PR team were kind enough to send a little nudge out on their email list, and it's no big surprise as they did fare pretty well. Bike of the year? The CB1000 Hornet SP, of course, being exceptionally good value for money at about 10 grand, and also exceptionally good fun, and it also took the title for the best naked of the year. Then, best A2 bike was the GB350S. Again, great value for money, a great looking bike as well, and it's got a bit of soulful charm to it. And in fact, Honda also took Manufacturer of the Year, with MCN saying, through a keen value-led approach, they've pushed premium performance back into the mass market reach. So what I'd love to know from you is, do you agree, especially given the economic context, are Honda offering the best bikes at the moment, or should someone else have taken that award? BMW, for example, have launched loads of new 1300s, some great looking retros. Ducati have overhauled their V4s, their V2s, the X Diavel as well is a beauty. And to be fair, Triumph have knocked out some really good bikes this year, like the Tiger Sport 800, and also some great value for money on the Trident 660, for example, with loads of new standard fit features. I don't know, personally I probably agree with MCN. Honda do really seem to be hitting the mark most often, but let me know what you think. Like I say, in the comments. Looking forward to new bikes for 2026 though. Well, one that's fairly keenly anticipated is the new Flying Flea Electric from Royal Enfield. And just this week they've published a rather impressive video of it being put through its paces with some incline testing, and it looks like some fair inclines as well. And so while it is surely mainly intended for city riding, I guess it's still perhaps reassuring to see it being very much properly being put through its paces. I will say though, aside from the bike, it's also interesting to see that Royal Enfield seem to be publishing more and more testing photos and videos. They did it recently with their 750 Himalayan and the electric Himalayan as well. And so maybe this is part of a new approach to kind of take control back from those spy shot photographers who I guess sometimes disrupt or ruin their launch plans and marketing plans. Either way, they've created a whole separate YouTube channel now for the Flying Flea, so Definitely head over there if you want to keep up with the latest. But one of the partners helping them with the development of this bike is actually Stark, who also contributed to the electric Himalayan project that we saw at ABR. So the motor and the 2 batteries were actually taken from their Varg off-road electric bike. But it seems they're still keen to forge their own path, with their CEO recently going on record as saying that they're working on a line of road bikes and also that they'll blow petrol bikes out of the water. Recently, they also reported that they were actually making a profit, which is very rare for an electric motorcycle manufacturer. And so I'd say there's a little more gravity to what he's saying than perhaps you might usually assign, with MCN quoting him as saying, "Most people don't see that an electric street bike can be competitive, but when we bring out our electric street bikes, we will change that perspective. I'm convinced that we can build street bikes that are significantly better than the gas bikes in all the main categories, and in fact, we are doing that." Given how popular or well reviewed the Stark Varg has been, I'm very interested to see what they come up with. But perhaps a word of warning, as CanAm, who only just launched a couple of new electrics, have already had to slash the prices massively, and so you can only assume that's down to poor initial sales. Cycle World report that they've had to knock $3,000 off them for the new model year, so the Adventure Style Origin now comes in at $11,500 and the Naked Pulse at $10,999. They certainly look the business, and the prices look fairly competitive now as well, until you realise that it's an 11 kilowatt motor, which is basically on par with a 125. Perhaps that's part of the problem. But moving swiftly on, also on Cycle World, they report that Honda have been working on a new wheel pattern which aims to cool down your brakes as quickly as possible. Now, the patent drawings show an Asian market CBR 250, but the assumption from Cycle World is that this tech would actually be intended for their MotoGP program. It shows a humongous front disc that uses the inner part as effectively like a heat sink, and then behind that you've actually got a wheel cover that's sculpted to kind of direct airflow onto that part of the disc. Of course, that would help to cool it down rather quickly, but also they've built the disc cover thing to have minimal contact with the actual rim of the wheel, and they've done that in order to stop the heat from the brakes from bleeding over to the front tyre. Very clever stuff. Maybe we'll see that come into a road bike eventually. But in the last episode, we also looked at the announcement of Tram's new Thruxton 400, which to me looks like a very fun little bike. Thing is though, the folks over at Powerdrift weren't quite satisfied with the level of spec, and so they were wondering what it'd look like if you took it one further. Now, these fairly crude renders have been done in-house, but they do help to bring the idea a touch closer to reality, with a grey paint job and also the full retro fairing, both of which are more reminiscent of the former Thruxton 1200, but also the gold anodized fork, which I think you'll find on the Speed 400, and an Arrow exhaust system just to finish it off. Does it actually look any better though? And does the 400 Thruxton realistically deserve the R treatment? Let me know down below. Now, another hotly anticipated retro this year will be the CB1000F from Honda, which is expected to launch in the next few months, with the recently displayed concepts looking very, very close to production. And I think most people are generally really happy with what they see. I think these are going to be super popular bikes, but one little bone of contention is the TFT dash, which of course it inherits from the CB1000 Hornet platform upon which it's built. Most people would say a pair of twin analog clocks would be much more fitting for that kind of aesthetic, and it looks like custom builders TSR agree. You see, they've potentially come up with a solution here that I saw on WeBike Japan, where they've got a nice selection of images of TSR's effectively homemade version of the CB1000F, again built upon the CB1000 Hornet, but just fitted with a similar headlight, similar tank and similar tail section to the proper Honda concepts. In the cockpit though, what they've done is retained that TFT dash. I think with it being so tied into the electronics of the bike, it'd be very difficult to remove it. but they've actually mounted it in a custom, it looks like a billet aluminium surround or housing that looks a little bit like, from the front end, a pair of twin analog clocks. Nah, that doesn't change the fact that when you're riding the bike, you're still going to see the TFT dash, but you gotta say, from the front, it is a neat trick, and so I'd love to know your take on this one as well. Is it reasonable to create like a fake housing like that, or should it just be all or nothing? Rounding off today though, we've got this report on Visor Down that a 31-mile stretch of motorway in the Czech Republic is being tested at a new 93 mile per hour speed limit, which really sounds rather good to me when it comes to cutting down journey times. Now, it is a fairly new stretch of road, they say, that's quite straight as well, and also the limit can come down owing to certain conditions like bad weather or heavy traffic. But it's another one I'd love to get your take on. Is it something we need more of here in the UK? We've got our US viewers as well. Would you much prefer a 93 mile per hour speed limit, or are the roads too busy, especially in the UK, to make that ever realistically a possibility? As always, I'd love to know what you think of all of our stories this week, so do let me know down below. Also, if you want to catch up on our other videos from this week, like the review of the Moto Guzzi V7 Sport, the full rundown of the CB1000F concepts, then I'll put a playlist on the screen now so you can give those a click. Do hit subscribe as well for more of the latest motorcycle news and reviews like this right here on MOTOBOB. A massive thanks for watching today, and we'll see you next time.